We are moving towards the second part of the program, and let me say that I've been a caretaker MC. The substantive MC is here. I'm going to be his servant. Whatever he tells me to do, I'll comply. At this point, I'll hand over to my able Bernard Koku Avle of City FM. Before I hand over, my key handing over notes is that I forgot to tell them the rules of the game. People were receiving phone calls, please. So send the message across. I'm happy to hand over to you. Bernard, welcome.
Thank you very much. Please put your hands together for him. And just to reiterate the point, so there's a conflicting instruction. On one hand, I am told that the deliberations here are live on social media. And so you can go to the hashtag EdgeCon2015 to follow. Yet I'm also being told that mobile phones are not allowed. So you put your phone on silent, and then you can follow on social media, because what tends to happen is sometimes people tweet some very salient points, and so you can follow that and retweet for those who are not here to follow. So you can keep your mobile phone on, but put it on silent. So that will be the compromise solution. All right, so before the launch ceremony, we want to set the scene for the program. Apart from the brilliant panel discussion, we have a man who taught me economics at the University of Ghana. I know a couple of things about him. I didn't get an A in his paper, but that wasn't because he wasn't a good teacher. It's my own problem. So I don't hold it against you. And this is the last time I'll mention it. He taught me industrial economics as an elective and macroeconomics in the third year. He's going to set the scene for us with a presentation on understanding Ghana's MSME ecosystem and policies. So that will give us a good context of where we are. And then we'll have the launch ceremony, and then we'll be up and out of this place. Dr. Festus Ebo Turkson is a senior lecturer at the University of Ghana, Economics Department. He supports Accra Hearts of Folk, and he went to Accra Academy. Those are the two things I know about him. Let's welcome him with a round of applause. To present on understanding Ghana's MSME ecosystem and policies.
Madam Chairman, Dr. Mrs. Hagen, Minister of Private Sector Development, and Ministers of State, Country Directors of TechnoServe and DFID, or other protocols observed. Anytime I have to present and this young man comes up, he always has to let people know he didn't get an A in my course. When students do well, they get A's, but when they don't do well, it's the lecturer who failed to give them A's. I'm happy to be here. The first time I got involved with TechnoServe was when Engine was launched last year, somewhere in April, and I had a chance to deliver a paper on the Ghanaian ecosystem. Since then, I have had about 2 or 3 occasions to share the insight about a sector that I have done some research on, and I continue to research on that sector. I'm happy to be here to also share an update of that story at the launch of EDGE. I listened to the dialogue. It was quite interesting when education was being made to look like it was not necessary for entrepreneurial development. But I'll tell you as I go through that one of the main attributes of entrepreneurs that make them highly successful is their background or level of education. And when I saw these young men and women doing so well, I can tell you that education has played a large role in that. Yes, we might not be training you directly to be entrepreneurs, but we are giving you the foundation that enables you to analyze things differently, for you to build networks, and then for you to make good use of your intellect to your good advantage. And when I hear people mention the CEO of Peace FM, and others, yes, they might not have had that education, but they are successful because they have employed people who are highly skilled to deliver for them. And their success depends on their workers, not just them. And that's something that we have to be very careful about, yes. Now, the ecosystem, the Ghanaian ecosystem is a system that is not different from any ecosystem in terms of the SME sector. And it's a terrain that normally when I have to talk to budding entrepreneurs, I am very particular what I tell them, not to scare them. But it's not a terrain that looks very friendly. And the young men and women will tell you that they've not had it easy. It's a sector that globally is the main engine of growth in almost every economy. In Africa, it is the engine that has driven economic growth in most African countries. And in fact, the micro, small, medium enterprises have been the cornerstone of employment in most countries. And when I listen to the gentleman who manufactures the bamboo cycles, it's an area that has served as a home to those who need to survive. So it's normally a sector that is meant for those who have to survive because there's nothing to do. And more often than not, the micro sector has been a sector that they've found something to do, at least to make something out of that. When you talk about, I'm trying to see if I can do the presentation without my slides because my pointer is not working. The micro, small, medium enterprise sector is defined as a sector that is mainly into manufacturing. In fact, there are sub-sectors in some of them in services, but most of them are into manufacturing. And normally, when I say this, I'm looking at enterprises that are into productive activities. I'm not talking about enterprises that just buy and sell and do not add value. Normally, when we define SMEs, we use employment size. And for the RPED and the UNIDO definitions of micro, small enterprises, we use 1 to 4 for micro, between 5 and 19 for small, and then from 20 to 49 for medium firms, and then above 50 for large firms. Now, the SME sector in Ghana, like I said to you, has been the cornerstone of employment and job creation. About 70% of our GDP is said to be contributed by the SME sector. About 80% of jobs, especially in the informal sector, also contributed by the SME sector. In addition, that is a sector that has over the years been trying as much as possible to offer what we call the apprenticeship training for those who do not have a chance to go to the formal education. And what has happened is that in terms of services like hairdressing services, like tailoring, like mechanics and so on and so forth, have had to go through training through the SME sector. Now, it's also been a source of livelihood to a high percentage of very poor people. And like the gentleman said, that is where a lot of people have tried to find what they could do to survive. Every economy in this world has developed an indigenous industrial sector on the basis of the SME sector. You cannot develop indigenous businessmen and women if you don't tackle the SME sector. And it has also been a place where if you want to even develop the skill of entrepreneurship, you have to go through the SME sector. And like this program seeks to do, the concentration is on those who are into micro, small, and medium enterprises. Now, the other facts about the SME sector is that the sector has, I've really disorganized my presentation. Is it still not working? Okay, I'm sorry about this. Now, in terms of the distribution of the SME sector, the last census that was carried out on the sector in Ghana was by the Ghana Statistical Service in 2003. And this was the distribution. Over 90% of enterprises are either micro, small, or medium. We are told that this year the Statistical Service is going around to do the next round of enterprise survey. And majority of them are located mainly in the main cities of Accra, Greater Accra region, and then the Ashanti region. Now, this is the data that I'm currently using on two papers that I'm working on. It is the World Bank Enterprise Survey that has about 1,200 firms that has been collected over time. And the distribution of the firms in that data set shows clearly, and it at least confirms what the Statistical Service found in 2003, that over 90% of such firms are either micro, small, or medium enterprises. Now, I've mentioned a few of these things. Let me go on. One fact about our SME sector is that most of our firms have an informal outlook. And this has been one of the main reasons that they have found it extremely difficult to have access to credit. They are unregistered, they do not keep book of accounts, they have no business address or location. And you know, any transaction that you do with a formal banking system, these are the basic stuff that you need about your business. And you cannot walk into a bank, however well written your proposal is, and go there without being registered. And it's one thing that we need to look at. Now, the other fact from the same data is that ownership of SMEs are dominated by Ghanaians, which is good. Even though we have a slightly greater proportion of them being male, fewer, 27% being female, and the rest being both male and female as joint owners. Now, in that data, the first round that was collected in 2006, the World Bank carried out an analysis of how productive Ghanaian enterprises were. And the findings show clearly that the food sector was the most productive, the textile industry the least productive, older firms were more productive than younger firms, and then foreign-owned firms more productive than domestic firms. And you find out that the reason why the foreign-owned firms are more productive than domestic firms is that they have the ability to employ highly skilled labor, because skill and productivity are closely related. And that is why I keep on saying that education is really important. Now, in terms of wages, the food sector pays higher than the highest, textile lowest, and then in terms of the age, older firms pay more than younger firms. So the conclusion from that analysis clearly shows that there's a high correlation between firm productivity, skills, and then productivity and wages. So highly skilled firms pay more and are more productive. Now, one other thing that has been quite obvious from a lot of studies that I've been involved in, and others have also seen that, is the fact that there seems to be a missing middle distribution of SMEs in Ghana. Normally, what you expect is that there's always a missing middle. In other words, you have a lot of small micro firms and then a lot of large firms. But what is happening is that, and which is good, is that we are having a situation where it looks like some of our micro and smaller firms are moving to become medium firms, but then the medium firms are not going to become large firms, which is a good thing. What we also notice is that some micro firms, some small firms remain small through their entire life and die small or micro. And there are various reasons why that happens in this country, for which is going to be the main focus of my presentation. Why aren't micro small firms growing to medium firms and medium firms into large firms, even though it seems to be disappearing? One, they have a basic problem, and almost all the firms that we've interviewed over time have come up with the fact that it is not that there is no finance. Finance is available, but they lack access to the finance. And studies by IET and others, some of which I've involved in, clearly shows that access to finance is the main obstacle that firms face. I try to do a sub-regional analysis of the percentage of firms that indicates that access to finance is their major obstacle. And you find that in Ghana, almost 70% of those firms that were surveyed by the World Bank indicated that access to finance was the main obstacle. Now, the question has been, what has been the main reason why these firms lack finance? The main reason why these firms lack finance, especially from the banking sector, is because these firms, one, I've already mentioned, are informal. Two, normally the resources that are available by the banks are resources that are supposed to go out on a short-term basis. And if you really need investment that is going to allow your firm to grow over time, you need long-term resources. And therefore, what it implies is that because of lack of long-term resources, MSMEs firms are not able to access those credits. The other fact is the volume effect. Some of you are so small that when you go to the bank, the cost of processing your loan is even higher than the loan itself. And therefore, they don't find reason why the loan should be given to you. And part of the recommendations that I'll make to you is that it's better that you form cooperatives. And then you go there as a group to go for a loan. Because when you form cooperatives, what happens is that it reduces the default rates, the potential default rates. And therefore, the interest itself on the loan would be reduced substantially. And therefore, once you get the money, then you have a situation where you monitor each other to make sure that you can mobilize resources to repay the loan. The other reason why they fail to give the credits is information asymmetry. That is, the banks do not know the type of business that you are, or your what do you call it? What you intend using the money for. And therefore, because they are concerned about the possibility that you might not be able to repay, they would have to give you certain eligibility criteria for you to try to meet before they give out those loans. Most of our SMEs do not meet those criteria, and therefore they find it difficult to access the loan. One of the main reasons is that they do not even have a banking or credit history. You go to the bank and you've never gone for a loan in your entire life. At times it's good if you go for money and then you pay. When you build a credit history, it reduces the interest that you have to pay when you go for loan. Now, when you look at this data, also coming from the World Bank Enterprise Survey, you find clearly the percentage of firms that make use of bank credit for investment. And that is less than, 20% of banks, of SMEs, use banks for investment. And then when it comes to working capital, just about 21% of them use the banks to finance their working capital. So it means that the banks have failed to provide the needed support that the SMEs need. Now, in terms of collateral, because most of these SMEs do not have the background that would allow them to go for loans at a cheap rate, at times the collateral value is even almost 1.8 of the value of the loan. In other words, about 180% of the value of the loan is the collateral that you need for the loan. And in Ghana, almost 72% of all loans require collateral. And most of these entrepreneurs do not have such collateral. Now, apart from that, even for those who have collateral and can meet the requirements for accessing the loans, they do so at a high interest cost. And it's surprising that we keep on having a government, or I'm not necessarily referring to the present government, but over time, our governments have always found the domestic sector credit market as a very good market for them to go and borrow to finance their reckless spending. And what has happened over time is that the T-bill rates have increased substantially. Now, the government is supposed to be the most safe borrower of credit. And if government is willing to pay, as at yesterday, 91-day bills of 25%, then you can imagine walking to the bank to go for credit. And I know that these days when you go for credit, then you are looking at paying almost 40% per annum. I don't know of any business that would be able to make enough profit to be able to finance such a huge borrowing cost. So when you were mentioning that the Minister of State should be mindful of some of the challenges that you face, this is one area that we need a government to do something about, because this is coming mainly from governments cutting out the SME out of the credit market. Now, in terms of the regulation, the institutional environment, most of the time, the procedures that you need to go through before you start business is so cumbersome that it becomes very difficult for most firms to go through that, and therefore they remain informal. Now, if you look at the current World Bank doing business database for Ghana, which has not changed between 2014 and 2015, you need 14 days and 8 procedures to start a business in Ghana. Now, it's better than the average for Sub-Saharan Africa, which is 28 days and 8 procedures. But when it comes to taxes, and you mentioned, the gentleman mentioned that the government should do something about taxes to SMEs, which is a call in the right direction. And you look at the indicators, the number of payments that a firm has to carry out in a year to pay taxes are 32 different type of taxes, social security contribution, pay all sorts of levies to, you have 32 of them in 2015. And that is an equivalent of 224 hours in a year for a firm to do that. And the corporate tax, in terms of profit for those SMEs, just beneath 20%. When you compare that to Sub-Saharan Africa and then OECD, you see that Ghana does better in terms of the number of payments and then the hours involved than Sub-Saharan Africa. But when it comes to the average for Sub-Saharan Africa in terms of the profit tax, Ghana is taxing more than Sub-Saharan Africa is taxing its firms. And as for OECD, we know it's much better. Now, another evidence that I found very disturbing was the enforcement of contracts in our law courts. In 2014, when I did a similar presentation, to enforce a contract, for instance, you have a contract with a supplier to supply you your inputs, and you've paid up and your supplier has defaulted. If you seek redress in the law courts, in 2014, it was going to take you 495 days and 36 procedures to enforce that contract. In just a year, it has increased to 710 days and 38 procedures. I mean, it's almost like you would have to forget about it, because for 710 days, if you have to go to court, and that is just the number of days and the procedures, not to talk about the cost of trying to enforce those contracts. Now, these impose excessive and unnecessary cost burden on our SMEs. And so one of the One of the policy prescriptions that, in some of the studies that I've been involved in, we have advanced is the fact that we should try as much as possible to minimize or make the regulatory environment very conducive for our SME sector so that most of them will become formal. The reason why some of them are informal is just because of some of these indicators. Now, the business environment itself is a high-cost environment. I mean, as we speak, for almost 3 years, we have an unreliable power supply in this country. Now, if you are producing for a company like Next or Tesco, clothing, and they have made their orders, you do not have power, which in other countries is taken for granted. It becomes a big issue for you. If you attempt to look for alternative sources of power, instantly you become uncompetitive because you are going to incur additional costs that would make the pricing of your product way beyond what your other competitors are charging, which means they are not going to be competitive. In addition to that, even fuel and utility prices have increased. If you take over a period of 18 months, from the 1st of January 2014 to 16th of June 2015, premium gasoline had increased by 51%. Gas oil over the same period had increased by 44%. So even if you are powering some of your equipment with fuel, that is how much you've seen an increase in your cost of production. And then the almighty CD dollar rate. The exchange rate in this country has not been stable in the past 3 years. In fact, last year, our currency depreciated by 35%, which is quite a huge number. And the way in which you calculate exchange rate depreciation, at times when you talk about a percentage, people do not see what you're talking about. For a currency to depreciate about 35% means that you are having to buy the dollar over a period of time, 1 year, almost double how much you need in cedis to buy a single dollar. Because there's nothing like 100% depreciation. Normally you expect it to be around 50% for it to double. And if you look at the data, on the 1st of January in 2014, the cedi was being exchanged for 2.1 cedis to a dollar. And by the end of the year, it was 3.30, and that is 35% rate of depreciation. That led to an increase in the cedi cost of imported inputs. So what it means is that even if you have reliable power supply and utility prices have not increased, you are going to have to face an increase in your cost of production because the economy is being mismanaged and your cedi is not stable. So this is something that is not your doing, but then you have to operate in such an environment. Now, if you want to have an idea about the increase in the cost of doing business in Ghana, the data that you have on the slide also shows how many days and the procedures involved in installing electricity from the point where you get a source of supply to the warehouse. Now, in Ghana, nothing has changed between 2014 and 2015, and Ghana is doing much better than Sub-Saharan Africa, which is also, Ghana is also close to what the OECD countries are doing. So in terms of electricity, it's not too bad, even though we can improve that. But when it comes to registering a property, which is very critical, especially to attract FDI into your country, we're having to go through a procedure that has not changed, 5 procedures, but then the number of days it takes to register a property has increased from 34 to 46, which is still better than the Sub-Saharan African average. These things come with costs, and therefore, like the lady said, when you import goods at the port and you get there and the dollar cedi, the cedi is depreciating, and you have to look for more cedis to pay for your duties, and then also have to pay for corruption, then it clearly tells you that the business environment is not very conducive. Now, most of our SMEs are also low productive SMEs. Why? Because compensation to workers are very low. Low level of education of your workforce means your productivity is low. An absence of decent workplace facilities, or other things that have to do with providing that environment for your employees to have an incentive to be productive. Most of these are not available in most of our SMEs. And therefore, what has happened is that most of our SMEs have failed to take up opportunities that have come up with the increasing global trade. We are not able to assess the global value chain and then create decent jobs in this country. There are also attributes about the entrepreneur which is also very critical, and like I said to you, education is key. And so we need to still take a look at education. But of course, in addition to the educational background of the entrepreneur, business-related training is also quite critical. And so the sort of training that is being offered here is also quite critical to helping our micro and small firms, the entrepreneurs, to do better. They also lack access to appropriate technology. That is why they cannot access global value chain, because the global value chain is such that your level of technology should be up to a particular level for you to be able to access such global value chains. And then there are a lot of laws, regulations, rules that impede the development of SMEs in this country, and it's something that we need to take a look at. Now, finally, what has to be done? And I'm happy the gentleman produces the bamboo cycles mentioned that government has to create a congenial macroeconomic and business environment for SMEs to flourish. It's something that has been said over time. And we need, as a country, to focus on that, because the SME sector is a sector that offers jobs. I mean, our formal sector can no longer employ. So our informal sector, where most of these SMEs are, should be the sector that we should now look at as creating the right environment for us to be able to employ more of our youth. The government also needs to encourage our financial institutions to adopt or develop financial models that will inform their lending to SMEs. I mean, I'm happy that some of the banks now have SME units, and I know for certain that the Danida Support to Private Sector Development Program, which is almost going to its third phase, during the second phase was supporting some of the banks to put them in the right position to lend to SMEs, which was a good thing. So government also has to provide the needed support for our businesses. Our businesses should also be encouraged to form social and business networks, which is very important. We should also develop efficient institutions that are indispensable to the functioning of input and output markets, and also improve the business environment to reduce the cost of doing business. And now for the SMEs, what do they need to do themselves? So I heard you talk about government should do this, government should do that. But part of the lessons that have been learned from elsewhere that will help you as SMEs to grow is that as an entrepreneur, make sure that you formalize your operations. Motivate your workers to increase productivity. Government is not going to do this for you. Be very innovative and efficient. Don't buy a new car as soon as you make profit. If you talk to those who have made it in business, one of the cheapest ways to refinance your business is to retain your profit, because it's cheap. You don't pay any interest on that. So when you make profits, don't buy new cars and don't build new homes. Put the money back into your business, because that is the only way you can grow your business very cheaply. We also need, and I'm happy that some of these young men and women are venturing into export markets. It's good that you venture into export market. The East Asian Tigers have gotten to where they got to because of the fact that they had entrepreneurs who were daring, who over time had, through the business environment, learned a lot from their interaction with FDI, and now were able to get onto the global value chains to compete with firms on the world markets. And I also mentioned that you need to form cooperatives to minimize the risk of default. Finally, you need to build systems in place and learn to delegate. It's always good to have a good team to work with. You need to delegate. It shouldn't be all about you as an entrepreneur, because we've noticed that in this part of the world, we only build businesses, we don't build empires. You build a business, and if, God forbid, you leave this world, your business goes with you. It's because you don't delegate. Nobody knows your business partners. Nobody even knows who has money to give to you or what loans you've gone for. Everything is all about you. And so when you are no longer there, your business will just die. Learn to sit back and delegate and see your business and thrive. And when you do that, when you are not there, the business will live. When you go elsewhere, businesses are empires. They have been handed over from generations down to the present generations. In this part of the world, especially in Ghana, we don't have many of such examples to give. You should also join networks of business associations, like the one that is offered by Engine, the Association of Ghana Industries and other business. Those business associations are very important because it's true that you can have mentors for them to mentor you into building your business. It's true that you could come as a group to advocate for policies that will help your sector. So it's really important that you also join such business associations. Then finally, have a growth and expansion strategy with timelines. Don't just have the strategy you want to grow, but come up with timelines that you can achieve. So set achievable targets for your firm and work towards achieving those targets. Yes, the business environment is not very conducive, but let me tell you, Ghana is much better than other African countries. And therefore, this is the part of the world where we find ourselves. And others have been able to make it, so you can make it. It's part of the fact that we also need government to do more to provide you the environment that will help you to be successful. And also be very content. Don't be very content, because you can always do better. And I'm happy that the chair for this program is also one of the examples of entrepreneurs who have been highly successful at what they do. And so I know when she comes up to pass her remarks, she would share a few of the things that she's done so well, and we all know her to be one of the best that we have. Thank you. I'll take a couple of questions on the presentation that I just made, or any other issue that came up whilst the dialogue was going on.
We'll take only 3 questions because we're a bit behind time. So the gentleman there first, we'll take one from that side, and we'll take one from this side.
Yeah. Hello, Prof. That was an excellent delivery from you. But sorry, I have to go on this point again. The educational bit, I think we are getting things a bit twisted. The word education is what perhaps we seems to be misunderstanding. I'm just talking about the strict formal academic education that we are over-concentrating on, but not education, because whatever you presented here, if we were to have someone from the informal sector to have presented, that would have also been a lot of education. But my question has to do with the regulatory system. In your research and your study, haven't you come across this mentality of our regulatory system where they seems to look at things from the punitive aspect of things than helping businesses succeed and to improve on their working? Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take the next question to the first column. Please stand up. Yes, please stand up. Is there a question from this side? Is there a question? There's no question from this side. Okay.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. The question I want to ask is these government regulatory bodies or institutions, are they meant for good or for bad? Because I have just realized that recently there was an entrepreneur who employed, according to his social network page, over 300 graduates from 2013 to 2014 April. Now this guy has been crippled. Before I left for this place, I called a friend who is working with him and I asked him. And he said, from May up to date, they have not been paid just because of the action of Bank of Ghana. And you ask yourself, if Bank of Ghana is working, what are they doing? And the CD is depreciating. It cannot be revived. And they are running after things that are not necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take one final question. Yes, the lady in the Please come forward. Yes, please stand up so we see you. Yes. Yes, that lady.
Thank you. My name is Gafaratu Feseni. We have heard a lot of stories, and what I want to ask is that the problems that they have enumerated, what are our maybe engine and then other stakeholders doing to help us so that we can come out from our shelf, the problems that we have, so that we cannot we are not able to compete with the foreign companies, and we are always here and then struggling. What can be done so that at least we can come up from our shelf?
Okay, let me take the last question. I mentioned that I've always supported what TechnoServe is doing in this direction. What the engine program is all about, and this conference, is one of the ways in which our development partners are helping us to support the private sector. And so, as much as they also provide resources for our government to make use of to help the business environment, they are directly supporting the private sector. And I know, for instance, that Danida also does what I mentioned earlier on the support to private sector development. And they are helping the private sector in various ways. Through the BUSAC Fund, they are helping in advocacy and stuff like that, which is helping in terms of influencing policy in the right direction that will support ISME. So a lot more is happening because our development partners are helping to improve the business environment. At times, it's for you to avail yourself to opportunities that they offer. And I'm happy that I'm here because I know once you're on this program, you see the usefulness of joining a program of this sort. Then, with regards to the second question, whether regulators or governments, what they do is to help or rather to create problems for us. I mean, the central bank has to regulate the environment. There's no doubt about it. I mean, yes, you can set up a business and be employing a lot, but if you are doing the wrong thing, we need to get you to do the right thing. So I'm not here to ask government to not to regulate or not the regulators to stop their strict regulation. It's very necessary because we need to create an environment that is conducive for businesses to thrive. And that also means that businesses should be doing the right thing. So if you don't have a license or you have not put in place the sort of things that you do to produce, there's no reason why the regulator should allow you to go on. Yes, jobs will be lost, but we cannot ask you to do what is not allowed by law because you are employing a lot of people. So I hope that that businessman would be able to get around his problems and then that would be solved. But I know the regulators and government always mean for good. In spite of the fact that we always criticize government, we know at times their intentions are good. It's just that at times we, and I say it's the political climate that also causes that problem. And for some of us, we don't believe the sort of democracy that we are even practicing is helping us. Because we have governments that have all the good intentions, but at times their objective function to stay in power takes them away from what economics is telling them that they have to do. And so, yes, the problems are being created. Government is borrowing at high interest costs, crowding out the private sector. But government will tell you, yes, we have to finance our budget. And so we need to provide roads, we need to provide hospitals, we need to provide all the social services that we need to provide. And there's need for money for us to do that. So then again, you don't want to blame government for all the problems. But of course, they can do much better because we know it's possible for them to do much better. And then with the educational bit, yes, I understand. I'm not saying that you meant that formal education was not good. I was only commenting on a few comments that I heard on the platform when the dialogue was going on, as if to mean that education doesn't matter in entrepreneurship, and which is not true. Education is very critical to entrepreneurship. And if you know what happened in the East Asian tigers, their countries, and how come they've come this far, education was critical. And normally when you teach issues about growth and all of that, one of the core indicators that we need to make sure we have policy trying to make sure that we correct is to have skilled our labor force. So you could have all the plans. If your labor force is not skilled, you'll not be successful. So the skill also means that you need some formal education. I'm not saying informal education is not good. The apprenticeship program that we've had over time has been one of the main ways in which we've upskilled our labor force. But the direction that the world is going now and global trade is going now, with technology and all of that, formal training becomes indispensable, right, for us to upskill our labor force. So yes, I accept what you are saying. My comment was meant to respond to a comment on the floor when the dialogue was taking place. All right, thank you.
Oh, I think you can do better for my lecturer than you are doing now. Thank you very much, Dr. Festus Ebo Turkson, for that good background.